a hate-love relationship. We know we got to be prepared. We know it's probably going to happen. We know, but we just hope for the best. And every little thunderstorm, here we are panicking over, are we going to have damage? Are we going to, it's a scary feeling, but it's home.
Man. Yeah. Jeez, you got too much stuff.
I know.
Well, you made it.
Did it.
It was hard to believe, but yes, we were heading back to Louisiana for yet another hurricane. This time it was Delta. We are now 4 names into the Greek alphabet, and unfortunately it looked like the trend of Gulf Coast and specifically Louisiana hurricane landfalls was going to continue.
Oh, you have the same.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Seats moving.
That's crazy. It's nice. Well, we deserve it. We're the hardest working team outside of the government.
Oh, yeah.
We got Brent set up with his rental vehicle, and I of course had mine. I had a big Ford Expedition, and it was loaded, all kinds of stuff, camera equipment, even the weather balloon and the helium in case we had a chance to launch. And really having both vehicles with all this equipment was going to help us once we got to Louisiana. We met Greg in Gulfport, which is of course where he lives, and we set off from there.
Never thought aluminum could be so heavy.
It's thick.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Rugged.
And you can looks like you can move it up here. You can do angles.
Exactly.
Man, I thought of everything, man.
David did a good job.
Yeah.
We got to Morgan City, and this would actually be our base of operations for the Delta mission. We had plenty of time to make some adjustments to some of the equipment if we needed to, and this actually included a piece of hardware that one of our crowdfunding supporters had crafted for us up in his shop in Georgia.
So here we are, the 8th of October. It's the day before landfall, and we're getting ready to rock and roll to go set up all the equipment.
The good thing is that I've memorized the map and
Right.
the distances, and I know every location.
So I guess there is some benefit. All right.
I mean, I like the track more that moved a little bit because
Yes.
the surge in that one road until you pass Lake Arthur,
Right.
that's a better area because that's higher.
Right.
When you cross that little river there at Lake Arthur, it's like zero to 5 feet.
No bueno.
We had our work cut out for us. There's no doubt about it. Louisiana, as we found out, especially during Laura and Marco, is very spread out. Some of it's kind of remote, hard to get to. One of those locations is Sippermore Point along the north side of Vermilion Bay.
Sippermore Point is right on Vermilion Bay, central coast of Gulf Coast, Louisiana. And what separates Sippermore Point from the Gulf is Marsh Island. Vermilion Bay is maybe 5 foot deep. Then you have Marsh Island, then you have the Gulf of Mexico. You know, it's part of living in paradise. You just gotta live with it, you know. And this board's become very popular and nationally known, you know. And it's a tourist stop. People come by and stop and take pictures of it and all. And first of all, a lot of people come down there not so much to see myself and my wife, because I didn't know a whole bunch of them at the time, but I had set up a hurricane tidal surge marker board on the front, marking red lines at what's the highest point the surge got for each hurricane. And what started me on that, when I bought the camp, I noticed there was a grass line at the top of the pilings under the camp. So I drew a string line with a level and noticed they were all perfect. Well, that was the height Rita had went to, and the reason I could figure that out is when a hurricane comes in, of course, you got winds, you got waves, everything else. When it passes your location, then the water starts getting ready to recede and the winds calm down. And all these little grasses floating on the water stick to the highest point. Then the water starts going out and the grass stays on the edge of the house or the pilings or whatever you have. Our place is 12 foot off the ground.
All right, 12:01 Central Time, October the 8th. There's Brent. This is the GoPro.
You gonna do that 10-minute test?
Right. You gonna do the 10-minute run?
10-minute run?
2 years ago, man. Those are the words.
Yeah, it was really weird setting up equipment here on the 2-year anniversary of when Brent and I were doing the exact same thing in anticipation of Hurricane Michael. Back then, these cameras were still kind of new. The Nest cams were. We were starting to use GoPros for the first time, and we really weren't sure what to expect. Now, fast forward to 2020, Delta is coming. We had a lot of confidence in our equipment. We had a lot of experience now just in 2020. So yes, I would say we were very ready for whatever Delta was going to bring to Louisiana.
What's going to be neat is to be able to see it this time from across the street.
We got a camera set up over there?
We do.
Okay.
And that'll capture everything from now until dark tomorrow night.
Everything went really smooth in Sycamore Point. Very interesting to meet and talk with Don. That was great. The history that guy has is just amazing. He and his wife were going to go ahead and evacuate and leave the area, so that meant that Brent and Greg and I were going to leave and eventually make our way down to the areas that Laura had the biggest impact on back in August. That would be like Grand Chenier and Creole, areas basically east of Cameron. But to get there, and as usually is the case, there's always a few adventures and maybe some interesting sights along the way.
On the way to Grand Chenier, we saw a whole bunch of alligators all over the place. Mark was definitely like a kid, but he's always kind of been that way when it comes to animals. I've seen him many times get out when we see turtles and save them and make sure they get to the side of the road. And I'm the same way. My wife and myself are also the same way. If we see animals, we try to, within reason. We're not going to pick up a 6-foot gator.
As we were traveling along, Brent was actually driving. I asked him, pleaded with him, please don't run over these alligators. They were darting out in front of the truck, kind of a ways ahead of us, but still, I was begging him, don't run over them. I had a special place for them in my heart. I'm just a nature kind of guy. I didn't want him to hit them, and he didn't. And, see a big one go across here or there. And then we came across this little baby, and he was just stubborn. Wouldn't get out of the road, kind of holding his ground. I mean, maybe the road was nice and warm, I don't know. So I got out and figured, let me go over and try to shoo him away. I figured, come on, it's just a little 8 or 10 inch alligator. What's the harm in that?
You got to get out of the road, dude. Go.
And it was kind of funny, but at the same time in the back of your head, you're thinking to yourself, is there a mom close by? Or is there even a dad or someone real close by? So yes, we're trying our best to help these animals, but at the same time doing it in a cautious way, because you got grass the size of your hip out there, and one of those could jump out really fast.
It's beautiful out here. There's wildlife everywhere, as there should be. And there's this hurricane coming, and I thought, wow, this could really be an interesting opportunity to maybe put one of our camera systems out here. But the question was, where do we put it?
Nice weather station. Wow.
We got those houses, this big pile. Oh, look at all this stuff that could get jammed up in here.
Right.
Sometimes the shot that we have from these remote cams is not going to be particularly exciting. It's not going to have a bunch of buildings in it or anything like that. And this was the situation down here in the Rockefeller Wildlife Refuge, that after a short debate we decided, let's just aim the camera out across the water. It might be interesting to see nature, to see wildlife in a big hurricane. I mean, why not? But before we could ever even get it set up, we had to deal with our own little personal passing rain shower.
Oh, that's some cold breeze there. Arctic.
It's ridiculous. Look at what we're under.
The smallest
All right.
covering ever. Yeah, move over just a tad.
Me?
Just an inch. Just an inch.
All right. All set.
Let's do this.
Should have a good signal.
Hello! Hello!
What a weird year.
It really was a weird year. We had the pandemic, we had all of these hurricanes, and it just seemed for some reason like Louisiana was just going to be in the crosshairs over and over again that year.
So in 2020, the hurricane season came down to steering winds in the middle and upper part of the atmosphere. The expansive Bermuda High, a fixture during the summer in the Atlantic Ocean, often sat far enough west to shield Florida and nudge tropical disturbances into the Gulf of Mexico. Now, at the same time, we had an upper-level ridge of high pressure that was frequenting western North America. And between the Atlantic Ridge and the Western Ridge sat this little weakness squarely in the Gulf of Mexico. And the overall positioning of those two steering mechanisms made Louisiana the target of not one, not two, not three, but 4 named storms over the course of the season.
What do you think, Greg?
It's pretty impressive to see this in person. Obviously, I've seen surge before, especially with Katrina, but such a remote area like this, it's really impressive to see. I mean, look at the combination of the surge and the wind. You see some parts where the wind ripped roofs off, but you see a lot of this is water damage, and that's what's going to kill you. That's the first thing that will get you in a hurricane.
We finished everything up at the Superior Canal, got the camera attached to the bridge, and everything was working. So we started heading west on 82, continuing westward, finally ending up over in Grand Chenier. Now this is where Laura's worst effects were, the highest storm surge. It was in that right front quadrant, Grand Chenier, Creole, that area. And you could absolutely tell, looking around, seeing all of this devastation, you could feel it. You could just feel that a Category 4 hurricane ravaged that area just a few weeks prior.
But it was all right. It was kind of in the cleaning process. Like everything, all the rubber was raked up, pushed in piles, they hadn't yet picked it up. Yeah. And we were like, this is all going everywhere again.
All right, 4 p.m., October 8th, Mark Sudduth here. 4 p.m., October 8th, Grand Chenier, Louisiana.
That's where all the ants and mosquitoes were, or I think maybe it was ants or both ants and mosquitoes. Like they were just fierce.
But I'd have to say this was the worst I've ever seen. I mean, literally it was just hundreds of them everywhere. Unfortunately, I think with Laura, there was a lot of, dead animals and just death in general all around, and they were feasting on everything. And literally you would spray the bug spray and it was like, it didn't even do anything.
Hell yeah, everybody camera. You hear it too? What do you want to go for on top or bottom? Shannon, just give me this handful. Just give me that stack of zip ties there.
During Hurricane Laura, we decided not to put any camera equipment east of Cameron, so that would include Creole and Grand Chenier, among other places, mainly because we knew at the time that Laura was approaching that it was going to be in the middle of the night. There's not a lot of infrastructure out there to begin with, not a lot of lighting, and whatever was out there, we figured it was going to all go dark and we wouldn't see anything. So that was a big void in our Laura coverage. Now, for Delta, we were fairly confident that it was going to come in, or at least the worst of the impacts were going to happen during daylight hours. So we decided we're going to put a Nest Cam, that's the live video that we do, and then that would be backed up with one of our GoPro cams to provide us with high definition recording in case anything happened to the live feed.
Well, I mean, to me, Cameron Parish people pride ourselves on like our self-resilience and things like that. But I mean, we already knew the impact Laura had done to us, so it was basically like, you know, here we go again. It is what it is. We're dealing with it anyway. It's home.
That is the one thing that I kept hearing from people time and again in Louisiana, and that is, this is our home. You know, the hurricanes are a problem. There's no doubt about it. They're very stressful. They cause damage. They can take lives, but these people have lived with them for generations. They call it God's country down there for a reason. And they don't complain. They just work as hard as they can. They work together, and they pick up the pieces and they move on. Now look, they know that it's only a matter of time before the next one hits. It's just, unfortunately, in 2020, it just kept on happening.
Does it give me a minute to figure out the shot?
At this location, just like we did in Grand Chenier, we decided we were going to set up 2 camera systems, the live cam and a GoPro, of course, to back it up. Now the irony is, it was the GoPro, as we'd find out later once we got everything back, the GoPro stopped working after only a few hours. The live cam kept going, giving us a front row seat to everything that happened during Delta, and it just goes to show you this is why, whenever possible, we like to have multiple cameras in a single location.
Really, it was just us and the animals out there. I don't think I saw more than maybe 1 or 2 cars the whole time we were out there. We're setting everything up in an efficient manner, and you know, with landfall not coming to the next day, we're way ahead of schedule. So we got everything done, and then we started to make our way back slowly.
Alright, so it's, what is it, 11, it's really that late already?
11:41.
Wow. 11:41, and we're getting ready to set up a camera system out here. I'm gonna get out into this mess, and
Now we're starting to get into the tropical storm.
it's gonna hurt.
We're up to the day of landfall, and we still have a few camera systems that we can put out, and I wanted to make sure we deployed everything we had, including a couple of these drop sensors from Kestrel. And so we went out from Morgan City, that was our base camp, really just covering as wide a swath as we possibly could. Now, as we're working, of course, Delta is getting closer and the conditions start to deteriorate, and that started to make Greg just a little bit nervous.
What concerned me was not that I was concerned for Mark or Brent or myself on what we were doing. What I was concerned is there's only one way in and one way out. So if a large, 50-foot tall pine tree falls over, what are we gonna do? Are we gonna chop the tree up and move it out of the way? I mean, maybe we could move one, but it's likely that multiple trees are gonna fall down. So it was this tricky balance of, we wanted to get down there and set up a few more boxes and set up a few more barometers and things for the storm. But at the same time, I was concerned that we are playing a little bit with fire, because even though we're not doing anything unsafe, a tree could easily come across the road and then we're stuck. And at that point, you're going to be on the top of a roof or something, riding this thing out in the middle of nowhere, South Louisiana, which at dark, which is the last place you really want to be.
Yeah, we had cameras set up across a pretty wide area. We're talking Freeport, Texas, that's our permanent camera, Creole, Louisiana, Grand Chenier, Abbeville, Esther, Sycamore Point, a lot of different places were covered, but we still wanted one down at Pecan Island. We had heard from some people over social media that said, look, if you could put one at Pecan Island, we would really appreciate that. It would give us an opportunity to kind of keep an eye on our camps down there. So we figured, let's go do that. And once we're done, we can then really focus on the landfall of Delta, which is now only a few hours away, and maybe, just maybe, have an opportunity to launch the weather balloon in the eye.
let's just switch back. Let's go to Poe. Obviously, we still don't have Lake Charles radar from
Yeah,
Laura.
that's a bummer. Lake Charles being
And
out.
here, I'll point up. You'll see us pop up right there in Lake Harper. Bink, right there. And here is what's left of the northern eye wall. Still got some pretty high returns in there. It's moving onshore right now as we speak.
We made our way over to the Lake Arthur area, and this was well inland from the coast, so we didn't have to worry about the storm surge, which was forecast to be several feet above ground level. And of course, it was going to spread inland a few miles, probably. And so we just sat there and watched the live cams. They were showing the eye wall quite well. And even though Delta was weakening as it approached landfall, it still packed quite a punch.
Now, those stronger upper level winds that Delta encountered as it closed in on the US helped to disrupt the vertical structure of the storm, and it actually became tilted on its side. Wind shear is the changing wind speed and direction with height, and more wind shear tends to result in a weaker storm, and that is what we had with Delta. And it wasn't just the wind shear. We had dry air, which was jabbing, punching at the storm from the west, and some of that dry air actually became entrained within the system before it made landfall.
Hurricane Delta is coming to shore, getting gusts in the 65 mile per hour range, maybe a tad higher. We're about 2 to 3 miles west of Lake Arthur.
As Delta made landfall, it was definitely weakening, and it looked like the eye was starting to collapse and fill in. So it looked like we weren't going to be able to launch the weather balloon in the center after all. So we just kind of sat out there taking everything in. We were quite safe where we were. Didn't have to worry about that storm surge, didn't have to worry about flying debris. So we just watched these cameras that we had put so much effort into setting up down along the coast. And in fact, we were hearing from people over email and social media about how much they appreciated the effort that we put into setting up all of this technology.
It was a relief, honestly, to be able to see what y'all had, to know that I still had a structure. I didn't care what was in it. I didn't care if everything was ruined, but I had a structure and I knew it was still there.
I knew the technology was there, but I didn't know y'all even existed to put cameras down like you do going ahead of a hurricane and put them along the coast so people can actually see the storm, see the wind, see the surge coming up. That was a big help, like I said. And of course, we all know in the old days, like we discussed Hurricane Audrey in '57, it was like, didn't even know. And that's, I mean, it's nothing compared to, back then compared to now.
Once again, our camera systems bore witness to the landfall of a hurricane right at point blank range. There really weren't a lot of other people down there. We saw a couple of storm chasers on a few of our cams, but even they had to flee to higher ground as the storm surge moved in. And we started thinking, this really shows that once again, every one of these systems, every one of these hurricanes are different. And in the case of Delta, even though it was weakening right up to landfall there, it had pushed a lot of water, the Gulf of Mexico, towards land. And we were starting to see that storm surge come in real time on these live camera systems. But more remarkable than that, the leftovers of that eye eventually moved over those locations.
I think it's over the years, hearing grandparents or older people talk about how they survived Rita in houses or jumping off the roof of houses in the attics onto floating by barges or trees, people tying themselves to trees to live. Older people talk. There was a lady back in, she's still alive, but Miss Sybil Clark. She had I think 4 or 5 kids, and she had 2 twin babies that she had to let go to save the rest of her. And I think that just, for what they endured without the technology we have now, we can make do with what we have.
I had talked to a man down there 40 years ago, an elderly gentleman. We used to fish his marsh behind his house. We always stop and drink coffee in the morning. And he told me a story. And he said, you see where y'all sitting right here at this table, an old wooden table in a wooden house? I said, yeah. He said, this is where my other house stood. And he said, I was sitting where I am, and he said, my wife was sitting across the table where y'all sitting. And he said, then the wave hit. And he said, you see that marsh where y'all going fishing? He said, my wife's out there somewhere. And that was from 57. He said, you see that big oak tree? I hung on that limb for more than a day and a night till the water went down, fighting off nutria and snakes and everything else.
So understand something here. We're looking at storm surge from a weakening hurricane. Yes, it's only a few feet, but Delta was falling apart as it made landfall. Now, this was not the case with Laura just a few weeks prior. That hurricane came in and decimated this area with a tremendous storm surge and unbelievable wind. Now we think about looking back at history, 1957, Hurricane Audrey, and of course 2005 with Hurricane Rita. I mean, you know, they call this sportsman's paradise. But down here, this is hurricane country. And it doesn't matter that it's October 9th. It's also 2020. And nature doesn't really care about calendars right now.
Typically, you're starting to get some west winds along the Gulf Coast, which should start to turn these storms earlier, moving more so towards Florida. With Delta, it was straight around the ridge, something that you'd see more so in August and September, and right into Louisiana, which in the year of 2020, it seemed like everything wanted to point towards Louisiana, and that pattern stuck all the way through the end of October.
And what was so ironic and so devastating is it went in 12 miles east of where Laura went in and produced over 100-mile-an-hour winds in the Lake Charles metropolitan area. And you're talking debris that's already been strewn all over the place after Hurricane Laura and piled up. Now it's just redistributed all over the place. So they had to do 2 cleanups that nobody would even imagine. And then the rainfall with Delta was kind of added insult to injury because it was a little bit slower moving storm. And unfortunately, where was the heaviest rainfall with Delta? It was in the northwestern quadrant that impacted Calcasieu Parish, Beauregard Parish, the same parishes that were decimated by Hurricane Laura's winds.
Afterwards, it's hard to predict the things that happen afterwards. You know, you have power poles down everywhere. It's pitch dark. You're in an area that's already been kind of damaged back before, so the infrastructure was already in poor shape as it was. There's animals again all over the road. We saw bigger alligators this time. They weren't just babies this time. It was not easy trying to make our way back to Morgan City. Yeah, we were just stair-stepping our way through different small county roads. They weren't main roads, a lot of these roads, and then we'd run into floodwaters, or we'd run into a downed tree, or we'd run into, you know, areas that's already been damaged where the road was taken out.
Delta is inland now, and it's weakening, and for the most part, we're finished. It's time for us to head back to the hotel in Morgan City, get a good night's sleep, because the next day we have quite the task in front of us. We got to go back out and pick up all of these camera systems, all the barometers that we put out. And of course, now it's dark. It's the aftermath of a hurricane. We never know what we're going to encounter while we're out there. But it was interesting and kind of fun a little bit to stop along the side of the road and maybe let the kid and all of us out to play just a little bit.
All right, we've cut the parachute for Herbie. We can't launch it. We're gonna launch each other. With it. Yeah, I think that's something people don't realize. They look at the radar and they don't see any precipitation and they think, oh, well then it must be pretty calm. Well, that's not the case. Even though it was dry, it had winds approaching hurricane strength, even though it was dry and you could see stars out and everything. You know, so we had a little bit of fun there. We got out, we had this little parachute that we opened up and kind of had a moment out there just to kind of like de-stress and not think about everything, you know, just take a few minutes off. Yeah, both of you hold on to one end each.
That was a nice release for all three of us, you know, getting to kind of play around out there in the wind. It was dry, we didn't have to worry about getting rained on, there was nobody out there at all, and it was just kind of relaxing, if you will, just to do something different. Now, all that being said, of course, we take this very seriously because it was a very serious event again for Louisiana. Now, certainly it could have been worse, and they had already seen worse with Laura back in August. But Delta here adding to that misery, not only to the hurricane season, but 2020 as a whole.
So Don, how high did it get?
All right,
Well,
sure.
Preliminarily,
Our good
we'll have the
friend-
GoPro to verify.
Our good friend
the
Delta,
inch,
you know,
right?
Miss Delta came right here,
Okay,
which
sounds
is
good. Thank
about 4 inches above Barry and Lily. They
Right.
were the same, but actually we had about, let's see, about a foot, a little more lower than
Right.
Laura from in August.
It is equipment retrieval day, and we started off down in Don Moe's camp in Sycamore Point. We picked up the GoPro, we picked up the live cam, both of those performed as expected. But the one thing that we really weren't expecting was all of this mud that Delta had brought in.
The hurricane coming in picks up mud off the bottom in the shallow part of our Gulf right there. Then it comes across Vermilion Bay and picks up mud. And then when it comes in, this mud settles, and when it goes out, it leaves at least 3 or 4 inches of mud everywhere. I call it gumbo mud.
What in the world what are you doing?
Well, I'm down to 3.
You have
not
3
pairs,
shoes,
just
right?
3 shoes.
Right.
I lost one last night. The wind got it and shot it about 50 feet in the air, and that was the end of that.
That's hilarious. You gotta have boots like Don.
We're going back to Lafayette today, but I'll be with you. I appreciate it.
You guys.
This is it.
Another historic
Another
one.
line on the board. I didn't want to do it, people, but it's here. Mother
Hurricane.
Nature.
Yeah, hurricane country.
Another hurricane, another event for Don's famous surge marker there in Sycamore Point. The GoPro captured the event quite well, I thought, but looking back at everything, I certainly wish, and this happens a lot, that I could have put more cameras in Sycamore Point to really capture and dig into how that surge behaved, what the whole process was. It's always fascinating to see. And you know, because this is Louisiana, it's probably not going to be too long until we have that opportunity, really the opportunity to learn right there in nature's laboratory.
Yeah, Mark, give this. I want you to pull on this. I'll hold it. Remember you said you could pull on it?
Right,
I want you to pull on this. Watch. That's only one of them.
right.
There ain't no way.
Yeah, so what happened to the one at Shoepick Bayou? How does that work?
I don't know. It's a mystery.
During Laura, we had a weather station mounted to the concrete Jersey wall there in Shoepick Bayou, very similar to how we have this camera system there in Esther along this canal. But the one during Laura, that weather station, it just disappeared. We don't know what happened to it, at least up to this point. That was still a mystery, but the camera that we mounted there on the canal, that did great. So we snagged it, picked it up, put it in the back of the truck, and off we went. We were now getting into the area where the worst of Delta storm surge was, and up to this point, the road crews had done a great job at clearing things out, moving all that marsh grass and other debris aside. And we started thinking, like, we just couldn't fathom at what it takes to move this kind of debris out of the way, especially considering that they just had to do it for Laura a few weeks ago.
It was very exhausting. You follow what they tell you when you work for the state government there. Be back the day after landfall. We were up in Alexandria. Driving back, it was tore apart up there, telephone poles over, and weaving in and out to get back. We get back, start clearing roads and get everything just about right, rebuilding shoulders to highways and stuff, making it safe, and then for it to happen all over again and just do it all over again.
Uh-oh. We got a problem.
Yeah.
He would have said something.
Unless you go.
Yeah, I see a hole.
Right. I'll get out and move it.
A little bit of a hole. Nah, there's room. Barely.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah, I think there's got to be a hole on this entire road.
Well, if people
Like there's a spot because
if
people.
Mark said they were coming in, they had to.
Look at this. So this, I remember all this junk here that
Right.
was yesterday, and now
Right.
just
The hurricane
spread around.
scattered it.
Yeah.
Delta, yeah.
Now they got to pick it all back up.
We did reach a point where the road was covered in water, so we decided we have to assess the situation. We always say, turn around, don't drown. So we put our tools to use, put the drone in the air to see what the road looked like ahead, and we could see the lines were very visible. The road didn't appear to be washed out. The water wasn't moving. The public usually doesn't have access to tools like this, but we did, and we decided, yes, it was safe, and we were able to progress forward. We weren't too concerned about the fact that it was getting dark out there. We saw, I think, maybe one other person. It was a guy in a work van that was making his way east along 82. We were trying to get to Grand Chenier. We figured if we go down 82 west, get to Grand Chenier, grab the equipment from there, get on over to Creole or just south of Creole where the last of our equipment was, and if we could just get to that spot, we were so close, we'd be done. We had finally reached a point on 82 as we kept going west that the water was up, it was covering the road, and of course now it is completely dark and we are the only ones out there. So I think it's safe to say, I can speak for all three of us, that the nervous factor was going up just a little bit.
I wasn't nervous like we were gonna die. I was nervous we're gonna get the car stuck and sit out here all night long waiting for somebody, or 2 days before they can actually tow the car out of here.
We came to an agreement as the water was getting, about shin high, that Mark was going to walk in front of the car, in front of the truck, and make sure that the road was there, because that was our big concern. The water wasn't flowing. It wasn't like it was like a river or anything. It was stagnant water. But what we were concerned is the road beneath us been washed out.
So if you want to continue this fun-filled adventure, you're going out in front of the car. I don't care if there's moccasins, alligators, I don't care.
We were being very cautious, and Mark again was out in front. But there's one part, I guess, when we weren't moving fast and it kind of goes into eco save and it just shut off.
And that's when the automatic start, we were driving and the car stalled. I thought it stalled. And it was the automatic stopping thing.
And we all looked at each other like, oh crap. Like we thought it like stalled out for good. You know, thankfully it started right back up.
But despite my best efforts to lead us forward on the road there in the floodwater by walking in front of the truck, it did get too deep and it was getting up to my shorts, and we felt like it was best that we go ahead and turn around. And yeah, it felt like a little bit of a defeat, but you know, in all honesty, we didn't want to be stuck out there, be embarrassed, be in the way of anybody coming through the next day to clean up. But I was determined. I mean, we were so close, just a couple of miles from that last camera location. I really wanted to get there. So we turned around and went back east on 82, trying to figure out some different alternatives. And even this led to its own set of really interesting adventures.
What are those?
I've never seen them. They're very cool.
What is that?
Maybe they came in with the wind from the Yucatan.
Right.
They're lost.
What is that?
I don't know, but they're cool looking.
Listen, you hear them?
Yeah. Look out, don't get them though. Honk or something.
They have like really long, gangly
Honk,
legs.
honk,
They're
honk, you're
moving.
about to get them. There you go.
What is up with those long legs?
They can't really fly.
Right.
Wow, that is cool.
What the heck?
It looks like penguins,
Right.
long legs. And
They're flying like hummingbirds. Give me clearance on the head.
Yep, you're looking good, looking good. Left, right. Whew. Jeez.
Yeah, those wires are still good and they're going up.
yeah, you're good through
This might be the highest wind right here.
Yeah, really.
That's true.
This corridor right here was wide open to the
Right.
ocean.
Hey, we just found where the strongest. And you know, Greg, this is where that red was on the radar.
It was.
Sometimes during the recovery process, we do run across clues that help to kind of show how bad the hurricane was, depending on where we are, whether it's storm surge, like a high water mark or something, or in this case, even though it was dark, we could see these power poles that were leaning, kind of indicating this area of stronger winds. And I felt like, yeah, right there at the coast, I think we had come across the strongest part of Hurricane Delta. We're making our way back east on 82, kind of retracing where we just came from, and we eventually come to this parish road that goes north, and I thought maybe we could stair-step our way back over again to the west and find 82. That drops south back to Oak Grove, just south of Creole, and that's where our camera systems are, and we would be done. So in that process, we come to this intersection, and it was just so weird. I thought, I think I see all these frogs like jumping into the water. I said, let's get out and go check this out in person. One of the more remarkable and memorable experiences of the entire Delta mission was when we stopped, turned the truck off, and just got out, let our eyes adjust to the darkness. We listened to all of the creatures that were out there, and then we just looked up at the night sky, and it was absolutely phenomenal, brilliant. The Milky Way in all of its glory. There was this boat that had washed up probably from Laura, and it was of course still there after Delta, and Brent got his digital camera and did a time exposure of it. And we just kind of took it all in. 2020 was full of so much turmoil, so much anxiety, everything that was going on. And just the three of us stopping, even for just a little while, to take all of it in, I think was very special for all three of us. We kept going, and we made our way up and around the worst of the flooding, the power lines that were down, the alligators, all that. And we finally made our way back over to Highway 82. That drops south. It goes through Creole and eventually back to that intersection at Oak Grove where the cameras are located, and we had made it. And I have to say, through all the challenges that we had faced trying to get there, when it was over, I think it was certainly one of the more memorable journeys that the three of us have ever experienced.
Creole 10-hour journey to get this camera.
This is the Jumanji prize. The golden boxes.
This is the one that got the 500 zip ties.
Well, 2 years ago right now, you were doing almost the exact same thing.
We lost the key on that one. Remember we didn't have it?
Right.
We had to saw it off.
It was 2 years ago to the day and almost to the hour, ironically enough, that Brent and myself and our colleague Tony were trying to get through a decimated Mexico beach in the aftermath of Hurricane Michael. And in that situation, we were trying to get to these boxes, and it was absolutely critical that we did so as soon as possible. Now for Delta, no, it wasn't quite as crucial at all, but I felt like, come on, we had been through this amazing adventure all day into the night, going through everything that we had gone through to get there, and that was the point. We made it, and we were finally done.
And it was the same thing. It was a GoPro and a live cam. So we know from doing this many years, you got to bring extra gas.
Oh, that's a must. An absolute must.
Luck
At least
favors the prepared.
at least 10 gallons minimum.
Right.
At least.
Here we
10.
are. This is that luck favors the prepared.
It was a good feeling to wrap everything up and not have any issues at all. We had plenty of gas. That's always good. So we made our way back to Morgan City, where Greg and I were going to prepare everything to head back home, him to Gulfport, and of course me to North Carolina.
Anything you want to add?
It was a pretty epic chase, man. I enjoyed it.
Let's get
Last
to have
night
everybody,
was-
all the new people.
Yeah.
Last night. Wait till you guys see
Yeah.
what we did last night. Holy cow.
Last night was insane. Jurassic Park style.
Yes, and Jurassic Park meets Jumanji.
Yep.
Wow. But yeah, we really accomplished a lot, and it's all because of you guys. You guys are the ones that made this happen, so we appreciate it very much.
I think we're up to like October the 11th now, believe it or not. And Brent is going to stick around. He's going to stay a couple extra days. He wanted to go down to the coast and put the drone up and capture not only the scope of what Delta's impacts were, but the 2020 season as a whole.
I hope that nobody, including us, never has to see a season like that again. I mean, with everything, like you said, the pandemic, everything else going on, it was horrible. You know, you lose everything, not once, but what you have left over from Laura, twice in Delta, and then you're fighting the pandemic, and it just, you know, 9 years old for Rita, I didn't have a worry in the world. It was like, you know, the parents took care of it, and we were kids. Now being, you know, grown and having my own, and trying to get them to understand that it's where we are. It's home, and it's what we gotta do.
I had just moved back in my house. Matter of fact, got a new roof, everything around September 27th. I had just moved back in. It was about a month after. Granted, we didn't have electricity, we were on generator, but we were home. And it was great. And we stayed not even a week, and we had to leave again. And I was like, this is not happening. And it was just like any little thing, like if you didn't put your towel up, it's like a hurricane's coming because you didn't put your towel up. You know, that's how it felt, because we were so just at each other. And it was like we walked on eggshells with our own families.
First of all, we never carried insurance on that place. I was always a gambler from day one. And actually how I dodged the bullet from any major damage in 17 years down there with no insurance, I don't know. But we're at my sister's house at Delta. When we came up north for Delta to get out of the harm's way, I didn't show it too much to the wife, Chris, here, but I was concerned. I said, okay, we dodged Laura with just minimal damage. Feel sorry for the people in Lake Charles, Calcasieu Parish. So here comes Delta. I said, this is the whammy, this is it. And I was like, man, it wipes it out. I've got a lot covered in mud that may be worth 30 grand, maybe at the most. Have no insurance or anything. And that kind of put the little clock ticking at our age, and you know, we've dodged many bullets. Maybe it's time to head north, you know.